Okay, good afternoon, Year 8. I am going to be talking to you about Stephen Crane's writing style. The idea of this video is then that you listen, you take notes, and that you go back to your classroom prepared to talk about Crane and the way he writes. So Stephen Crane has been described as writing in a naturalist, impressionist, or American realist style. To start with the impressionist argument, the idea is that he would write picking out colours and by fragmenting descriptions, which is really interesting if you think about the text that you're reading in class. So the very first line of his novel reads, "The cold passed reluctantly from the earth, and the retiring fogs revealed an army stretched out on the hills, resting. As the landscape changed from brown to green, the army awakened and began to tremble with eagerness at the noise of rumours." So what's interesting there is not just the use of colour, so that change from brown to green as the light changes, but also the way that he breaks down the images for you. So you've got the cold, then you've got the fog, then you've got the army, and then you've got each of those three things separated in that sentence, which is an interesting approach. He's also described then as a realist, so somebody who's trying to get to the heart of something. Interestingly, he argued that a lot of literature on the Civil War until this point had been quite idealistic. So I was very brave, so I did this. When I was faced with this challenge, I did this. And it lacked a sense of real emotion and reality, he argued. So he tends to drop in very personal details. Again, in our extract, he writes about the tall soldier who's gone out to wash his shirt. Once, a certain tall soldier developed virtues and went resolutely to wash a shirt. He came back flying from a brook, waving his garment banner-like. He was swelled with a tale he had heard from a reliable friend, who had heard it from a truthful cavalryman, who'd heard it from his trustworthy brother, one of the orderlies, at division headquarters. So you've got this point of real sense of grittiness. It reminds you these are soldiers who've been on the road for months and months and months. It reminds you that these are everyday men. They have everyday bodily functions, shall we say. So this is a soldier who's sweated, who's got his shirt really manky and has tried to clean it. What's interesting is the sense of humour, though, that runs through Crane's realism. Once a certain tall soldier developed virtues, the suggestion being that hadn't bothered to clean his shirt until this point, which also highlights how unpleasant that shirt might actually be. Also, what's interesting in that particular extract is that hint at sarcasm that's also running through a lot of Crane's writing. If you look at the three words he uses to suggest that this is a very true story, he was swelled with a tale he'd heard from a reliable friend, so somebody who's trustworthy, who'd heard it from a truthful cavalryman, also somebody who's trustworthy, and then he goes on, who had heard it from his trustworthy brother. If you hadn't got the point, the idea is that you're supposed to start doubting this story because the truth of it is exaggerated to the point where it's almost stretched out of possibility. So Crane writes in an impressionist style, he writes in a realist style, and he tries to create the American Civil War as though it's a true thing, what the heart of it is. He tries also, in this attempt to be real, to write in a way that captures the dialect that was used at the time. So a lot of the direct speech you'll find in the extract feels a little clunky, especially to us as an English reader. So you've got, "What's up, Jim?" The army going to move, lots of abbreviation, lots of cutting off, lots of blurring. "Oh, what you talking about? Oh, you know it is." "Yeah," instead of "you," again to suggest that these are poor American boys. "Well, you can believe me or not, just as you like. I don't care a hang." And then you've got that colloquialism, a hang. "I don't care at all, I don't give a monkeys, I don't, not bothered about you." And there's a sense of the colloquial mixed with the abbreviations, mixed with this sense of real informal vocabulary. And all of it as well, if you look at it, is quite monosyllabic. So if you're talking about numbers of syllables in words, to suggest that these are poor, not particularly well educated, working class boys, he uses monosyllabic or simplistic vocabulary to suggest that and to really hook onto the reality of their conversation, of their talk. And then he introduces our protagonist, and he starts talking about his protagonist's relationship with his mother. And again, the realism, the naturalism comes through, because this isn't an idealised relationship, the boy and his mother. Henry says his mother, "Don't you be a fool." And you can always hear her telling him off. She's not celebrating his bravery, she's not praising him for going off to war, she's properly giving him a lecture. And he says, "Ma, I'm going to enlist." He says it, straight, direct. And she criticises him. But when it comes down to it, when he actually tells her, "No, Ma, I've done it, I've enlisted," she goes back to her Christian faith and she says, "The Lord's will be done, Henry." Which isn't what he wants. And then again, that realism comes back through. She'd finally replied and then continued to milk the brindle cow. She just gets on with her chores, she gets on with her job, because for a lot of poor Americans, life relied on their ability to survive this way, through agriculture, so through farming, so through milking the cow. If she isn't milking the cow, then they're not going to survive. So even though her only son is going to go off and fight in a war where he may die, she's got to get on with life. And there's something really poignant actually about that realism towards the end, because when he finally leaves, instead of this big showdown and a loving hug and "Oh, I miss you," and the crying, what you get instead is a list of things that she's done to make sure that he's okay. So she's packed socks and put his best shirts in, and she wants him to be warm and comfortable. And it's that sort of that mothering instinct there. She wants him to be comfortable, she wants him to be warm, she loves him. But she can't say it. And it's really actually quite poignant, and off he goes, wishing there'd been some romantic and grandiose gesture. But instead, what Crane gives us and what Crane gives him is the reality of American life for poor and the working class families. At the end of the section we look at is that really, really beautiful moment. So you've got still, when he had looked back from the gate, he'd seen his mother kneeling among the potato parings. Her brown face upraised was stained with tears, and her spare form was quivering. He bowed his head and went on, feeling suddenly ashamed of his purposes. So her harsh and hard exterior has hidden the depth of her love for him. And that's part of what makes Crane's writing style so moving, is the way he chooses to portray the harsh and hard reality of his characters. So you might want to listen to this again before you take on the quiz challenge, but make sure that you are familiar with Crane's writing style before you see your teacher next.